Hi everyone, this is Tom, and this week's character is Elodin for Rhine. Elodin is a goddess. The theme for this week was deities and cosmic beings and things that have a little bit more existential prominence than your typical character. I was expecting there to be a lot of NPCs and things submitted, and that's perfectly great. NPCs actually end up sometimes being some of our best characters, at least on a conceptual level. Uh, and I was not disappointed. Elodin is essentially, at least, an ice, cold, frost sort of based deity, and if there's quite a hefty 7-page write up from Ryan that I'm going to go through. But the joke for this week was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy number 42 being the answer to the universe's biggest question, something to do with the meaning of life. And someone in the week prior made that comment that would be they made that connection, and I figured why not make the theme something a bit more hefty than in that regard. Like you can't really go sci-fi like the books that it's from, but fantasy's still fine. I thought that was a good idea, so I went with it. So largely she's essentially humanoid in figure. Well, pretty much just one-to-one human. So not much change in that regard, just based on the description. I figure, um, while this is going on, actually, I'm gonna save the write up for when I'm rendering because that can take a while. I got your guys' comments. The no one said that I should fast forward through the rendering stage. Just wanted to get your input on that, and I think I'm gonna just stay with it. I'm just gonna do one to one. This is the whole process, unless sometimes I have been known to forget to record segments at a time. And if that happens, you'll notice, and I'll usually comment if I notice. But yeah, so everything is just whatever amount of time that it takes, then it's just sped up all at the same rate, one to one. So that makes sense. Thanks for your input, guys. I appreciate it, and I'm glad that you enjoy it. It's fun, if not stressful, to do it. Um, I guess which makes it rewarding. Uh, um, but I just didn't want anybody to get bored because it does seem to take a long time. That's kind of one of the annoying things about it. And I've said it before, which I say a lot. I'm just so scared of repeating myself and just wasting everybody's time with these videos. I want everyone to be new and worth watching, as long as you're interested in the subject, I guess. Um, but yeah, it's a long slog to get all this rendering and stuff done. Where normally I would do something where I would paint it, just imagining paint on like with acrylic paint where you're mixing the shadow colors and everything and rendering stuff while you're adding color at the same time. You're sort of getting your brain to do double duty. But if you, even though it feels like overwhelming sometimes to me anyway, once you get like an amount of colors and things sort of figured out already, it really makes it a lot easier to continue on, and you build that momentum when it comes to painting something. Once you have that palette and those colors and values resolved, later on, um, yeah, but it is sort of hard to get to that point. Now, the benefit to doing handling it where you um, do the rendering first, the occlusion, like the shadows, essentially. That you can think of it as just a black and white drawing, a monochromatic, or yeah, black and white, grayscale, uh, and you can see it all in that one dimension so much easier and get it to how you know you're going to want it. And then once you go and add the color, you can easily do that and adjust things underneath the fact. So you don't have you're sort of taking care of one stage now and separating it from the other, and then you get to the point. It just makes it much more easy. But the problem is, um, it feels like you're behind. It feels like you're taking too long when really you're sort of taking a shortcut. At least once you get to a point where you've got the rendering resolved, you're satisfied, and then and then once you start adding color, it really gets near the finish line much faster. Even though you've been working on this meticulous thing for so long, and you're just sort of waiting. In my mind, I have it built up so that I think like the color stage is going to take just as long as the rendering one, but it really doesn't. And then doing touch ups on top of that. Uh, yeah, that's some good ways to work. In the case of this one, I colored it differently. For the most part, I went straight to color, kind of paintery stuff. I had an idea in mind of as far as like how I wanted to deal with things material wise, and it was largely, I guess you could call it experimental. Like I didn't know how it was gonna look. I had something in mind, and I'm known for saying that I can't draw what's in my mind, but it served as my direction, and it's something that I would love to have a whole day to itself to resolve. And I'll kind of talk about what I was thinking, but um, I wanted to build it up with still a limited color palette, but I didn't go with value first. I thought that the layering of colors might have wound up being difficult, but in moving forward, I think I'm gonna do either the occlusion shading approach primarily for myself. It seems like a wise way to go for like as I've explored the process and sort of tweak things, even though I haven't diverged wildly. I've found that I'm most happy with those results. I get, or at least to a point. I get to the point where it's like something I could hand in, but then I like to go and do a painting thing over top, a paint overlay on top, which is sort of annoying if I ever need to do touch ups. But I guess once you get the paint over stage and you have all the colors and values resolved, it's actually kind of fun at that point. So ignore the first 6.5 minutes of this video. So as it goes, she was fun to draw. She does. She has sort of a taller, more athletic physique, which is fun to do. Actually, if I'm going to be going into that stuff, I may as well um, start off with who she is, and then we'll see how that goes. So actually, it's 6 pages. The first one is the introductions and everything. So Elodin, the goddess of cold, or Elodin. It's Elodi. I mean, you see it. It's in the title. Never mind, I haven't made that yet. Elodin. She was named after a character from Patrick Rothfuss's book, The Name of the Wind. Actually, my wife knows that book and likes it. I haven't read it though. It kind of has that otherworldly feel to it, but it's simple. But it's still simple for mortals to speak out loud. I've had a lot of influence from those books and that series implemented into my D&D game. I found that picture online somewhere and thought it was cool. He included a reference picture. Actually, I agree with him with the name. To me, it sounds like something Tolkien would have come up with in his. He was the linguist first. His names and languages and words are still unmatched in my opinion. The appearance. Elodin appears in a female form with blue eyes, blue lips, blue hair, etc. I'd say she looks like an adult. Her skin looks cold to the touch, and for the most part, appears in the nude. Not gratuitous, but she doesn't really need to wear anything. She often has appeared to our group wearing a crown made of ice and other armor-like structures that she wears on her body. She is on the tall side and with a sporty type physique. The picture attached is pretty much what I described to my players, but in no way does she need to look the same. We rolled when they first met her to see how attractive they thought she was, and they all find her to be beautiful. Her hair goes down to about the middle of her back, and often wears it up encased in some kind of crown made of ice. If you just said something, I didn't hear what it was. Why? Sorry about that. My phone thought I was addressing it, and I would never do such a thing. Personal items. In our world, the gods have influence from the godly plane of existence and also upon entering our planet by taking a physical body. As far as we know, Elodin has been around since the creation of the gods themselves. With the gods' creation, they fought for the souls of the living, and soon what is known as the gods' war began, and is still taking place in the vast plains of the universe. The gods would often create items and weapons for their followers that would help strengthen their devotion with the gods themselves personally. Elodin created herself a body and has been on the planet since, most of that time being trapped in someone else's shrine, buried in the desert, lost to time. Godstones. One such item called crafted by the gods were godstones. Godstones were made in all shapes and sizes, but were basically direct links to the god themselves, usually given to their most devout followers and at their most devout places, like shrines and temples. Currently, Elodin has one godstone about the size of a softball. It's like a glowing glass orb made entirely of her own power. It's basically an extension of her physical being. They are beautiful to see and make for quite the centerpiece of any place dedicated to a god. The God Forged Dagger. Also, during the God Wars, the gods crafted weapons from their own powers in what are known as God Forges that were imbued with tremendous power that could be wielded by the gods themselves of the mortals whose souls they looked after. Elodin, during the God Wars, crafted a misericord of her own protection, or for her own protection. These weapons did fatal damage to other gods, as the only way to kill a god is with godly power. What was not known is that these weapons, when used on their creators, would essentially cancel out the god who created the weapon's power, making them momentarily mortal, trapping the god inside a mortal body. A misericord, I had to look it up, I've never heard that term before. It's like it's a dagger, a military dagger, essentially, long and pointy. Misericord, if I'm pronouncing it right or not, I don't know, but it's a French term. Personality. Elodin is very well mannered. She is sweet and kind to strangers as she has no followers and is open to making new friends. She never seems like she is in a hurry, and for a god who is trapped inside some ancient shrine buried under the desert, she is very patient. She is very knowledgeable on the lore of the world and other deities, and is a good source of information to my PCs when they have questions. She wants to be worshipped as it is her reason for existing. The backstory. What started as a mission to meet with a baroness in a city at the edge of the desert quickly turned into my three main players' favorite session that we have played to date. They call it their only A+ outcome. Word had it that the city of Rokirk was being attacked by a wizard who was controlling sand zombies, and that the baroness of the city wanted to hire the group to take care of the issue. While on the road to Rokirk, our group was stopped by a crew looking to collect on a debt that one of the PCs had acquired in his backstory. When he couldn't fork over the gold, they were knocked out and tied together and left in the middle of the desert with none of their items, armor, or weapons. I literally made a sandbox and dropped them in the middle of it. They did not know which way the city was they were meant to go to. They had no idea where the thieves had gone with their stuff, nothing. They freed themselves from their restraints and headed off into the desert. As soon as it was dark, they stumbled across across the camp that the thieves made for the night, and using all kinds of cool tricks, defeated them and got back all of their stuff. The next day, they continued across the desert, and they eventually wandered right into the doorway of a shrine that had been dug up slightly. Inside, they found it empty, and needing to know what's under every rock and pebble, found a secret doorway leading down a massive flight of stone steps that went way far under the desert sands. At the bottom, they found a chamber that was completely frozen, floor, walls, everything. Inside, they found Elodin bathing in a pool of ice water. She emerged and asked them if they were there to rescue her. After some lengthy conversation, they learned that she was trapped down here below the shrine, pretty much tethered to stay in proximity to one of her godstones that had been corrupted by some dark magic. She would only be able to leave if she obtained her other godstone that was being held by a demon in a town not far from the desert. She could feel where it was being held. She was trapped inside this room for the last 2,000 years. The three PCs agreed to help her and seek out his lost godstone so that she may leave and return to her temple away at the top of the mountains. Elodin bestowed upon them her blessing, which gave them the chill. The chill made them impervious to weather, as they would never be too cold or never get too hot. It put a slight blue tint into their eyes and their hair, and also gave them two powers that they could use as their channeled divinity spell. One being an ice missile, like Edea in Final Fantasy VIII, and the other was an ice armor spell. They could use one of those powers every 24 hours, with a religion check praying to her. It's come in handy in some pretty fun instances since. Anyway, the group traveled back into the desert, no longer having to be drained from the effects of the sun, and found themselves at the main gates of Rokirk. Once there, they met with the Baroness of the city and were officially given their mission. The Baroness wanted to hire them to find an ancient artifact that would help lift the spell that was controlling the sand zombies, and when they would hunt down and kill the wizard orchestrating the whole thing. In order to lift the spell, they needed to perform a magical ritual with 2 magical orbs, in quotations. and the heart of a demon. Oh. The Baroness had one of these magical orbs that was discovered somewhere in the desert. The other was in a shrine in the desert, as well as was guarded by a very powerful demon. This demon could be weakened by a very powerful ancient weapon that the Baroness also had in her possession. The plan was to take the weapon down into the shrine and weaken the demon, which is actually Elodin, and then kill it and cut out its heart and bring back the second magical orb or godstone to lift the spell. Now I put this session together in a way that they would or could find and talk to either one, Elodin or the Baroness first, and then get the information needed to proceed however they wanted. As soon as the Baroness finished with her briefing for them, they decided to go to the bar and discuss things. They now had in their possession of Elodin's god weapon, unknowingly, that would leave her vulnerable to attack to which she could be killed. As seen in the picture of her stats, she would have been very weak after being stabbed with her own dagger. Put this picture together from something I found on the internet, and I just changed the color and added the blood of already in case it did go that route. Some backup imagery. They immediately decided that the Baroness was full of shit and decided to sneak into her mansion in search of Elodin's second godstone. My brother's character asked if using his detect item spell would work on the godstone since he already seen the other one. I made him roll for it, and he of course rolled a nat 20. Nice. They immediately went for it, and then upon leaving the mansion were met by the Baroness, who revealed her true form, one of our then BBEG's minions, the Spider Demon. They had a very fun boss fight, and then the Baroness was rescued by a few of the other BBEG's minions. They returned to the shrine under the desert with the second godstone and freed the weakened Elodin from her magical prison. They then traveled with her to her temple that she has been a huge staple to our game in the year and a half since that session. In one of our biggest sessions, called the Battle at Elodin's Temple, our whole big group helped defend her from the BBEG, who was looking to kill her and take her godly power. It was epic. In the session leading up to that battle, a smaller group of my PCs found a baby next to its dead father in the mountainside as they were heading to the temple. The baby was being hunted by a pair of drow that wanted the baby for some reason. Knowing that the baby would likely die in the cold of the mountain, they asked Elodin to give it her blessing, and we had a tender moment where she did so and blessed the baby. She is also currently taking care of the baby. The main village of our campaign currently is the goddess of fire, known as Venturosh, who is a natural enemy of Elodin. Venturosh wants to destroy the world and take all the souls of the living with her before she goes after the other gods of the universe. Elodin's misericord might be the only thing able to stop her, but its existence is a potential threat to her own life as well. Currently, my brother's cleric is toying with the idea of becoming the first paladin of Elodin and building a new temple for her to gain strength in our ongoing campaign. Also, a baby Leonid is learning to walk. And let me just double check. No, that's everything. So that's the write-up for Elodin here. Very, very rich, very thorough. I really enjoyed reading that. It's always really nice to have as much information as I can get, because the more you know, the more you can tell. The more little interesting details you can give that are personal or direct and exclusive to that one character, and I think that's important. I think it's crucial, and I've gone over that many times. Again, but yeah, as we go. So going through the description, she's well mannered and sweet, and she gave me a sense of a certain level of regality, and just high manners. So I thought having a stance or a pose that was very symmetrical, grounded, very just not emotional or like sporadic or anything or crazy, but something that was graceful, gentle, but strong and grounded. She's a more serious character, just something that's not like flamboyant or crazy. Also, a way to make her be holding her dagger, something that's like a prominent fixture, probably not only on her mind, but in the minds of those who would like to destroy her. It's something that matters to her character. And it's also something I was thinking of where, I mean, I had the option to draw her as nude or with her ice armor on. Um, and I was trying to think too of like, if she has this dagger, like, and I should be drawing it, but I don't think I couldn't picture her like wearing a belt like a human. Um, and I guess like I could picture her it being like stored sort of like in Cinderella when the fairy godmother pulls the wand down out of the air, out of thin air, and it's in her hand. Something that gods could do. Like it wouldn't necessarily be exclusive to her. Like any sort of god would just know that it's there and just like be able, something like that was an option. But in a way to or it could be something that would go inside of her. And I did end up, I did draw the Godstone inside of her, but it's something I imagine could pass in and out. I picture her essence and her body being something that she has quite a lot more control over than the standard corporeal being. Um, but I thought, anyways, yeah. Back to the dagger. Yeah, I put it in her hands so that I didn't have to solve that problem. But that's the secondary reason. The main reason was that it suited her pose, and it was mostly that I was just kind of happy that it solved that problem too. All in all, as well on this character too. For some reason, I seem to be having a hard time settling on one sort of approach and like kind of how to go about it. In this case, I just started rendering and just letting it work itself out, not worrying about the small details too soon. That's one thing that helps too is trying to get a good grip, a good start, and that comes with um, getting a sense of kind of where you are, setting up landmarks of the figure, and for me that helps. And once again, it's general to specific. So even with this face, it took me a while to get to the point where I was happy to kind of get it to a place, leave it where it was, keep working on it, and finally pull something out that I knew I didn't have to go and like demolish later. And that started with just rendering just a medium sort of shadow around where I knew her head would be in shadow. And that helps to define the form, and then from there, that informs where everything else is going to be and where whatever sort of value it's also going to be. Just working that way, it can help really break the intimidation of it, and because that happens to me a lot, I get intimidated all the time with this sort of stuff, especially if you don't have like a model for reference and you're just sort of trying to process it like some software or something. Just trying to think of like, okay, where is the light literally falling on her, and where would it then not hit? Almost like if you've ever had a shower in like an overhead shower, or like a like a laser beam waterfall shooting downwards, or from other sort of angle that you're very aware of in your own mind, and picturing that just showing you where the light or the water is going to first hit, and that's where the light goes. But yeah, general to specific. So starting with the large general shapes. As far as the outfit goes, yeah, like I said, I did have the option to go tasteful nude or clothed, and there's a bunch of reasons why I went with clothed, or sort of a few bits of reasoning. I have no problem with drawing a nude figure, but I do know that I have families with children who watch, and I don't know how they would feel about that, so I left it open. I mean, every character I draw does go through sort of a nude phase, but I don't make things explicit. Plus, it would also be kind of hard to fill an hour of just sitting there drawing just a nude figure. It's just too simple, too basic. And I know that it makes sense. It was one of those things where it makes perfect sense for the character, where it's like, why would she care? Like she has no sense of impropriety here. She's been away from human contact possibly forever. At least 2,000. It's either 2,000 years or forever, probably. So she doesn't know like what the sort of standards of like what sort of proper or expected for how much of your body you can reveal to strangers. Um, so it just sort of it made sense. It would also um, I found it would have been so much more interesting to see what she could have been wearing, or to sort of explore that idea. Um, but it also gave me more like visual real estate to have some ideas and to try some stuff out. Um, if I had tried giving like the textural approach that I did to a naked figure, it would be even more difficult to understand and more cramped. Um, and there's sort of less stuff that you can say about a character. However, but I do want to say that it is perfectly suitable for her to be just completely nude. But I thought that this would have been more interesting, and it's sort of showing more rather than rather than less, rather than simple. Um, now, if Ryan had just said that she's nude, it would have been nude, just completely nude. But when he did mention the fact that she does have like an ice crown and ice armor occasionally, that's the only reason that I even swung to that vine, so to speak. It just gave us more and gave us more to talk about. Not much more. I did go really simple. I'm always trying to find ways to keep a character design simple. It's really easy to go overboard. It's I find it more difficult to know when to stop uh, when it comes to details and stuff, because you can just keep adding every little bit of detail, every little bit of thing. But I think every concept artist should pursue simplicity, unless it's of course this is a frustrating thing is that you should try for this one maxim. You should always be ready to um, not pursue the maxim, depending on the character. It's knowing when to break the rules and when to follow them. And once again, if you know how to break the rules, or if you break the rules properly, that's the same thing as following them. Or if you choose to break the rules, then that's the same thing as following the rules. Um, but yeah, simplicity. I mean, depending, it can be easier to make things simpler, and it can be more difficult to make things simpler. It could be a variant on who's drawing it, who's writing it, who's viewing it, um, or whatever. But it could, yeah, or it could just be the character. It could be the artist, whatever. I think maybe I'm assuming some people it would be easier to add complexity. Some people it would be easier to simplify and like remove stuff. But I think it's it's hard to take away too much. I mean, oh wait, no, it's easy to take away too much. You need those precious few details. Um, I think anyway. I think that's one of the things. I think it even might just be a personal obsession with it because I remember like one of I've I've been now that I'm older and more cynical and curmudgeonly, and I'm just sort of set in my ways. I'm not looking for it as actively as I used to, but growing up, I just always loved learning about the lore of things, learning about the creation process of something, whether it was as the story would have it, or if it was the creative person who was bringing something to life, or whatever, anything where it was like the detail about where this little bit comes from or where we had the idea for this and all that. To me, that was always the best part of um, it was probably the best part of any sort of fiction. I think it was the attention to detail. It was the love that went into the craft. It was the respect of the subject that the creative people working on it had, and it was the robustness of the world that they were creating that made things special to me. And I think that's what I'm always trying to go after. That's why I hate arbitrary stuff. That's why I hate so much just modern stuff and just fire hose concept art where it's just you just spray a bunch of crap or stuff. But I don't want to be too disparaging because it's a business and there's time and place for all things. But when something is just chosen because it worked well in a focus group or because somebody had lunch that day and they were feeling good and they just pick something out of a wall of options, um, I'm not a fan of that. I would rather pick an unpopular correct design than a cool looking wrong one. And there's a level of subjectivity that you can fight me on over. Uh, but uh, but I mean, you don't get to pick who you look like. You don't get to pick what your friends look like. You don't get to pick what people you admire, what they hate look like. I think there should be some of that with characters. I mean, some yeah, I can't predict what people look like. Their stories will tell themselves like on their on who they are, but I think there's a part of that where it's like if the character is lovable, if you grow with them, if you see them grow, if you go through adventures with them, you'll love them. It's not about how they look. Sure, the thing about designing for how they look is like, will this get clicks on YouTube, or will this get someone to pick it up off a shelf at EB Games or whatever? So there's incentive to push for it. There's incentive to want it. There's something where, I mean, there's even just like, is it something that you'll want to cosplay as, or whatever? There is so much to be said, and I'm not disparaging things. I think things should look good. They should look cool, as long as it's appropriate. But usually, protagonists are and antagonists are cool looking. Um, anyway, so it's not there's not going to be much points of conflict there, but yeah, I think there should be some aspect of I think there should be a philosophy of just letting this character live and trying to do as honest of a job as you can of bringing that person. You should see them as a person uh, into life. Um, that's that's kind of what that's what I'm thinking about. It sounds a lot more lofty, I think, maybe when I'm when I'm trying to describe it than when I'm thinking it. But I'm trying to describe more of like kind of the journey that I've gone along as an artist, or as like a concept artist, I guess, rather than any sort of active thought processes or anything. As I'm thinking, I think it's just so locked into my brain and my mindset that I'm just thinking of like, okay, what would this person have? What would they do? How would they stand? What would they wear? How damaged would or pristine would this thing they have be? How would it be made? That kind of what materials? How well? That kind of thing. Now, as far as this goes, um, she is an ice goddess of some kind, uh, and I thought it would be cool to. I wanted to give her if she's got ice armor. No, it's not really like armor. It's not plate armor. It's not because I didn't want to just have like chunks of ice on her that would technically block blows and stuff. I wanted it to be something um, a bit like a sort of a different way to do it. I guess not that this is like mind blowing or anything, but um, I wanted it to just be like deep blue, pure ice of like a frozen lake where it's deep and there's cracks in it, and it's not just the multifaceted white and blue rocks that ice is usually depicted at. This was really experimental, and in some ways parts of it worked, in some ways parts of it didn't work so well. Like I said, I wish I did have more time to really kind of develop it. I might even do that just for fun on the side, but the idea is like it's and she's not an ice sculpture. I'm not trying to picture her as being like you can wave to your friend on the other side of her. I wanted it to be more like if when you're looking into her body, it's like you're looking into an infinitely deep lake from any angle. Like no matter what angle you're looking at, you're looking in towards infinity. So it's just gonna get dark um, past and through her. I did have some of the cracks spiraling around the lower part of her gambeson visible, just to add a sense of depth and to have some of those cracks and seams. I needed those there to make some level of um, flexibility around. I picture that some of it would maybe bend softly, but either way, I wanted there to be clearly delineated areas of or joints for possible movement. In case it's something that would ever get turned into a 3D model and need to be animated. There's precedence in the design already to make room for it. It's also a graphical element, but it also would help it make it look so that if it was turned into 3D, that it wouldn't be super broken. If she was bending, it wouldn't all just turn into gummy like a jujube. But yeah, so that's the idea for the dress. It's just inspired by the deep cracks of thick ice. going back down into the deeps of uh, outside of the multiverse. But then it was a real pain in the butt to try to render it and light it and everything. I didn't try to go too far. I just sort of touched and go. All I wanted was, does it look shiny? Okay, I gotta go because it's hard without a reference. And the only reference I could find that was anything similar was, I mean, lakes, but they're flat and they don't. There's not enough information there for me to pick. I guess there would have been if I had more time, but to sort of see how the light would have wound up around her. I think I approximated it well enough to communicate what it is. The other reference that was possible that I did look up was ice sculptures, but the problem with that is that you're looking through it and you can see the background, and the thing that makes the ice sculptures look like ice sculptures is the fact that you can see through it and that it's reflecting the things around it. And this character is being drawn in a white void, and she is also not see-through like an ice sculptor, so it wasn't that helpful as far as reference goes. But when I do add some details on the shoulders to draw some attention up towards her head, I it is sort of, I was looking at, it's like sort of some of the patterns you can get in an ice sculpture. But it was very fun. But yeah, this is here what I'm talking about. Instead of using the occlusion approach, which I think this would have been really difficult to do and keep track of with just as like a monochromatic image. But I was looking at photos of ice, and I sort of was able to think of it as being three different colors. And even though I am using a slight amount more, I think, but it is largely it is just sort of the two. There's sort of like the deep inky depths, um, and then sort of like a lighter blue sort of core color as they get, and as the material gets thicker, and then there's the color for the cracks on the surface, and then the color of the cracks down through the middle, where they go down and penetrate through her body. Yeah, these are some shoulder details just to make her look a bit more like elegant and um, designed, you could say, or it's more like an outfit rather than just a weirdly shaped shoulder. The idea for it, like yeah, I forgot to say, it's not just armor like plate armor or like riot armor or something. I wanted it to be based on a gambeson, which is it's that the padded jacket underneath armor. Not all armor, but some armor types. Um, it wound up looking a bit more like a dress than I was planning, um, but it's still. I think I mean it still works. There's no problem with that. Yeah, I'm working it out. I wanted to include the Godstone in here, so I figured I'd. I don't know if I'm breaking Ryan's lore, but I thought it would probably be suitable to have it inside of her, and then it could pass out through her, like she could sort of reach into herself and pull it out and what have you. As far as her skin, um, the references pictures that Ryan included, she did have this pale, bright blue skin, and I thought that's perfectly fine. I picture it being something, um, I guess, similar-ish to snow. I imagine something, but not really like it wouldn't look all lumpy and crystally, but it would be something kind of like or like a frost, like the frost that builds up in your fridge, that kind of thing. But then it would smooth into something much more skin like a hard packed snowball or something. But and then it just ends up being something sort of like this. So this part here is this. That's where like I wanted to show that her body is one piece, and so that's that's the underside of her gambeson going down into where her legs are. And so she is clear, and there's some level of visible form that you can see. But yeah, it is going. You can see into where her legs would go. But I didn't think as far. I wasn't thinking like. I imagine that those holes going down into her legs are um, not very deep. Like that, her legs aren't hollow. Like you couldn't just poke your finger into her leg and be there. Uh, but that like you could. I picture them being like they fill up as the leg becomes that skin color. So yeah, they're not that deep. They're like a couple inches. I was having some lag issues, so I started merging these layers and trying to just simplify things, which happens. At this point, I've saved a B file. I like to, if I'm going to be doing that and merging a bunch of layers, I'll usually save it as a new file so that I can preserve them in the old one if I need them for in emergency purposes. If you've got the hard drive space to spare, I recommend it. There's no harm. The only harm is that it's inconvenient sometimes, just because it's annoying to worry about. But um, yeah, my computer was having a hard time. I'm starting to get nervous about it. It crashes and restarts by itself about once a week at least. I'm getting kind of freaked out about that. I don't want to have to buy a new computer, or and I don't have the skills to find out what part is causing it. I did build my own computer, but it wasn't very expensive. Um, but I'm sure I'll find a way to fix it. So I'm not that worried. But yeah, it was laggy. So I started to pare down. Sometimes I'll do sketching on like if it's like a big picture or whatever. I'll even just start with the image in grayscale and render it then monochromatically or grayscale style at a large format, just because then it saves on file size. And I'm used to having not the fastest or most amazing computers, so I've this stuff that I've just kind of come up with habitually just to as like little workarounds. Although usually at work I've always worked at places with fast computers, so I guess I'm lying again. So you can disregard the first 42 minutes of this video if you like. So yeah, more rendering. This is already now I'm on a paint over layer, just trying to go in and work it out. But now that I have a range figured out and I've got a palette that's sort of naturally emerged just through what these materials are, I feel confident in just going in and painting stuff over. I still have a built-in reluctance to do paint overs or to lose something and need to redo it, and that's just a holdover from just I guess learning and low confidence or risking. There's been so many times, over 1,000 in my life, where I've drawn something well by accident, whether it's a hand or a finger or an eye or a shoulder or something, and I always notice it when that happens, and I'm always aware of when it was an accident and that it can't be perfectly repeated. And my skills have grown as I've grown, um, and I'm further than I have been in my life. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but there's something to be said about that just sort of lingering with me, where it's like, did I actually draw this correctly, or was it just sort of a fluke? So I just have this sort of built-in thing where like I want to preserve something, or if I'm happy with where something is, then I'll make sure that I don't destroy it, or I'll save it on its own layer. When really, I think it's time to just pave over stuff if I need to and not worry about it. Where it's like, I know this bone is connected here and it's going in that direction, and it doesn't matter if I lose it now and redraw it later because it's going to be the same thing. If it's going to work, it's going to work the same way every time because it's locked in as far as what it is as a real object. So it's just a matter of putting it right back where it was. And so I can just erase any part and just put them back in if I need to. I mean, I'm trying to, as I learn as an artist, I'm trying to think of things like how light works, how the body is pieced together, how the muscles change as the body position changes, how the bones do this and that, and all these things, and perspective and fabric and those sorts of stuff. Basically, anatomy and fabric and perspective will get you a long way, and light. Um, but when you get a sense of those, when you study those, the still lives, life drawing, diagrams, doodles, just effort and practice, all the things that are difficult and take up lots of your time. Basically, by getting as intimate of an understanding of those as possible, you you chip away at that fear and that hesitation and that reluctance and that inability where the more you understand those things, the less reference you'll need to rely on, the more you'll be able to just make something work because you just know how these things, what's affecting these things, why these things are the way they are. You're basically taking a few things about how the actual physical universe that we live in behaves, and you're taking that and you're generating what Tolkien would call a sub creation, where we have this ability to make new worlds and take what we understand and what we appreciate and even what we might like to change about the one that we live in now, and we have this innate spiritual impulse to create our own worlds. And the best ones, I think, I mean, I've been talking about Tolkien a lot in this video, but like Middle Earth, I think, is one of the greatest feats of Western, the art of Western civilization in the last century. Like, it's absolutely just, I can, I'll save, maybe one day I'll make like an hour long Middle Earth video. But the worlds that we value the most, that we love to live in the most, are ones that feel real, that feel true, that they have that ring of truth to us, even though they're lies. Like even something like Star Wars, it doesn't have to be something that's down to earth or realistic in that sense. Like it's not like a like Isaac Asimov's stories, the sci-fi stories. They're very realistic. They're very naturalistic and very down to earth, even though they're fantastic. But Star Wars was way out there, and it still feels realish enough. Um, but they're all worlds that that they play by rules, and the rules aren't that far different from the real world. There's you might have magic and wizards and stuff, but all the things in that world still operate on their own same rules. They need to. It's the internal consistency. Um, and you can't have internal consistency without a knowledge of uh, consistency. And the more you can understand the consistency in our own real universe, the less you'll be able to imbue into your fictional works. And I hope I'm still making sense, but that's kind of a long way of saying you should study things, do art studies, study anatomy, color, lighting, um, fabric, perspective, the fundamentals. Because when the more of an understanding you have in those, the more of that you can bring into your art, and the more it'll work, the more it'll resonate. You'll give it bones that it needs, no matter how fantastic or bizarre. Again, if it's the more bizarre you can make it, if you're breaking the rules intentionally, you're following the rules. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. A lot of this stuff, I hope makes sense. We'll see. So yeah, character wise, it's still tentative lighting and trying stuff out. This, uh, yeah, ice is. Turns out ice is hard. I thought the cracks were fun. I found those to be fun. Still challenging. It's still something that I would love to try out lots of iterations on and explore more. But yeah, it's like where do the speculars go? Where do the shiny parts go? Where does the ambient lighting go? Where does the Fresnel reflection go? Or even on these feet are a lot simpler than the character, and I did that for selfish reasons. Um, it was because I was very happy with how simple they were, and that I would love to be able to paint simply and be as satisfied with the feat on this character as I am with anything else I paint this simply. Um, they're sort of a there's sort of a, like me saying this is what they need to be. They're simple, they're fine. We know what feet look like. The volume and the form is there as I am satisfied with them, and I want to be able to paint stuff like that forever. Just super simple, but everything is there. Like the anatomy is still there, the form is still there, the scale is still there, proportion and everything. Um, so I'm definitely I'm happy to keep those simple and out of the way. So I was thinking of ways to sort of break up this large shape of Gambison that she has here. I was thinking of having some sort of frost, um, inspired by. I mean, for no reason other than I like it. I'll admit it. Inspired by Jack Kirby effects. Mignola does it a lot too, and it's impressive what sort of materials and substances and forms you can depict with this approach of just erasing circles in some sort of way. It looks sort of like beach foam, and I'm okay with that. I can live with that, or like soap suds. But it's just frost. There's something to give her just her outfit a little bit of extra flavor and interest. I mean, they say that Inuits have over 200 words for snow, which is a lie anyway. But there is a lot of different types of snow, uh, and it's more than just one type. There's not over 200 words, but there is over 200 different conditions that you can describe that snow is in. And frost and stuff. It was I growing up in Canada. I always thought winter was such a chore and it was so boring and everything was so monotonous and everything is so white and gray and dull and it's just snow and you can't have any fun. Well, I mean, you can have some fun. There's actually a lot of fun you can have with it, but now that I'm older, I kind of realize how rangy and interesting it is, and like you can tell by looking at stuff if you can walk on top of it or if you'll fall right through, or if it's powdery, or if you could pick it up and like you can just tell by looking at it if it would be good for sculpting with. Here's a little bit of extra, more frost ideas, sort of going off with like kind of. At first, I was thinking sparkles, and then I was thinking freckles, and then that evolved into frost on your face. But anyway, like I was saying, there's so much texture and life and range as far as what cold things can be. It's not just stalactites and lumpy balls of faceted blue and white and everything. There's so much you can do. And I thought just having that a little bit of the range expressed on the character, I thought would be pretty suitable. And for the crown, um, her outfit was looking quite blocky and large, and I felt that had it kind of covered. But I wanted her to seem more um, royal and feminine, and I guess those words would cut it. But something even like sophisticated, where it's like, yeah, she can have this big blocky armor on her shoulders and like for her body, but there's also like ice that can be like super like thin and brittle and delicate and crystalline and tiny and beautiful. And I think that that would be a much greater show of uh, godliness about over ice. If you're an ice or a cold goddess, that you could make intricate, beautiful things. I think that would be a much more impressive feat. Inspired by Russian Russian female royalty headwear, just organic shapes, Art Deco-y, something very feminine, beautiful. Well, I was sort of in my mind. I was thinking that it looked kind of like, kind of reminded me of butterfly wings, or even a bit of dragonfly wings. But I'm not gonna. I'm not there. There was no idea in my mind when I was making it. I just wanted something beautiful. But it did definitely. It did have to be um, interwoven into the hair, as was described. Her hair is involved with the headwear. And then here, trying to add some level of blush or skin tone variation, just to add a bit of life and kind of fleshliness to the skin. But as far as hair, I mean, not really much more than just thinking of ornate braids. Um, Now, in my mind, that seems like ornate braids and fancy ones. But I know that if I looked it up, there'd just be the most crazy braids, just absolutely just out of this world, over the top stuff. And I don't picture her sitting there braiding her hair, but I picture her basically just being able to will her hair into whatever shape it would. So really, it could have been crazier. Could have been something something else, but again, it's like, these are first draft characters, and it's easy to see places where they could be different or improved, or different things that you'd tweak after the fact. But that's one of the things. Is it's a never ending fight. There's always something you can change or tweak or update if you want. Um, yeah, these are first draft things, but it is fun to. I'd be lying if I didn't get a lot out of seeing them be drawn again and thinking of what I would do differently or what I would change or what have you. At least this time I didn't forget anything. I promised I wouldn't forget anything ever again, and so far, uh, I'm living up to it. So this is the I can't remember the name. Marisicord. It's a god blade, and it looks a little weird. These perforations, as basically trying to think of like, typically it would just be like a sword that glows or something, or like a dagger that glows just to make it look magical. But in this case, I was thinking of, if it's going to be a dagger that could stab or cut a deity, that it would need to be something infinitely sharp. And so I tried to sort of carve into it like it was a fractal, like a fractal edge. So essentially, I'm just trying to draw it as having an edge of infinite complexity, so that it could cut through a deity or a god or what have you. Um, it does look quite sci-fi, and it is quite a bit more ordered than an actual fractal. Um, but that was my mindset. And again, like if this was for a project like a film or a game or what have you, like this character would go through many dozens of iterations from many artists, and they would try stuff out. And even now, my mind is racing about the other designs that I could have done. And I mean, you could have something that trails off in a different direction, but it is a Marisicord. It is a dagger, so it does need to have this straight sort of blade. At least that's how I interpreted the email. But yeah, so that's why this blade looks weird. It kind of looks like some of those. I don't know. There's some knives you can buy, like kind of like mall ninja knives that have all these holes and perforations for show, but it's not. I don't think it's a dumb idea. I would love to explore it further too, but yeah, we'll see. I'm happy with it. And then here I'm just tweaking the values and tones, just seeing if anything else sort of better works. I always love playing with curves. They're really fun, and they get you a lot of colors that you can't paint in. Or if there's like a transition or a transitory color between like something that's lighter and darker, it can add colors and values that you can't paint in. It sort of makes stuff up for you. So that is Elodin for Rhine, and she was a joy to paint, a cold goddess deity. This is for the free weekly character art lottery, where I draw your D&D characters, your pen and paper fantasy RPG characters, or if you've been writing a fantasy novel uh, for years or what have you, and you have characters in it that you'd love to see painted like this, you're free to enter that. Just no video game characters, just because people who play video games, they've already got a visual representation for their characters. I want to make stuff for people who have characters so far that have been trapped in their imaginations. So anyway, this is To find out more, follow me on Twitter at R&D Fantasy, and you can also visit rndfantasy.com for for past winners and links to videos and everything else. And anyway, thanks for watching. Hope it helped.